Well, thanks, Rajiv. And thank you to Wazir and Rajiv and the Branding team for having me here. I went to my first Branding event in, I think it was November. And it's amazing that it's been, what we at, half a year since then, since I went to the first one. It's really nice to be asked to join their kind of first anniversary event. So my name's Lekha. I'm a brand design director at the Otherly. We're a brand and innovation agency. And I'm kind of hoping over the next hopefully 20 minutes, it was 30 when I practiced last time, I'll be able to take you through a little bit more about what brand design is, a bit about my journey, my approach, how I got here, and hopefully share a bit of an insight into how I progressed in the industry. So I specialize in strategic brand and packaging design for consumer brands. And when I say consumer brands, think anything you see on a supermarket shelf. Those are the brands and clients that I specialize in. And I've been working for about 10 years now. Some really cool categories, some really cool clients, some more glamorous than others: cat food, DIY, spirits, a lot of chocolate, biscuits. But I always think, some of them sound more glamorous, but there's always something for me that's interesting in every brief or any brand that you can pick up. So this tends to be the general perception of South Asians around graphic design, especially when I speak to kind of elderly people in my community. A lot of people kind of think, oh, it's just logos and cool visuals, right? Like, that's what we do. It's all visual execution. And my reaction tends to be something a little bit like this. Because it isn't. It's so much bigger than that. And for me, brand design is storytelling. It's always about, as designers, it's trying to find out what is that interesting kind of golden nugget, what's unique about that brand or product. And there's always something interesting, but what is it that separates that from other competitors, marketing the same product pretty much most of the time. And actually, design is about celebrating that unique story, that unique aspect through distinctive design. And that's design that makes a brand instantly kind of recognizable, memorable, and desirable at the end of the day. And also, why I love this job is because through storytelling, design can solve problems, basically. It's all about problem solving and challenges. And it could be as simple as looking for your favorite kind of chocolate flavor on a shelf, which tends to be the kind of category in the space that I work a lot in. But it can be as big as kind of giving global brands purpose and impact in the world. And I think that's so exciting. And it's an industry that constantly keeps you on your toes with the challenges you need to solve. So the way I kind of approach it, how do you find that unique story? And it's always about starting fresh. It's starting, to take away your preconceptions of what a brand or a product is and really diving into the world of it. So for me, it's always about, what is the product? Who's the consumer? What does the consumer think about the product? Who are the competitors and how are they positioning themselves? What are the trends that you see in culture that are shaping the direction a brand could go? And it's always thinking, actually, once you understand that problem, you understand what your story and your design needs to do to achieve that, achieve a solution strategically. And for me, I meet a lot of designers and everyone's very much about the visual execution. But for me, before I design anything, it's all about having a strategy and a big idea. For me, design without strategy is kind of just like something nice to look at. And it should never be that. There should always be a direction and a purpose to what you're trying to achieve. So what does that kind of look like day to day? Like, how are we telling brand stories? So for example, Milka, I don't know how many people in this room are familiar with this brand. It's a massive kind of European chocolate brand. It's almost like Cadbury's kind of European cousin. And they're one of the oldest chocolate brands in the world, which is amazing. And they wanted to celebrate 120 years of tender chocolate through a campaign where they distributed 120 birthday wishes. They were asking consumers to make their wishes come true. So this was a really nice project. And actually, that was a unique aspect and a unique story we wanted to celebrate, all about the birthday wishes. So what we wanted to do was probably, after about 120 probably different pack concepts in the end, we came up with this one kind of idea of, birthday wishes being conveyed through an aesthetic execution of sparkles that make up the distinctive brand assets. And when I say distinctive brand assets, these are sort of key visual elements that consumers already associate with the brand. So yes, the logo is a massive part of any visual identity, but also the distinctive brand color, the lilac cow, the chocolate chunk, the flavor names. It's always about how these assets come together and how we infuse that birthday wishes story over the top of that to make this kind of not just a nice piece of design, it's a distinctive piece of design, hopefully. And when we're working on these kind of projects, there's always the context to consider, right? So it's not just a nice piece of pack design at the end of the day. It's not just conveying a story. It's about, okay, this has to be arranged. So how do we ensure consumers are going to be able to navigate this on a shelf? Is it going to have to become an ad idea? Like, how are we going to promote this on social media? And there's always these functional needs to consider with a brief, but once you've addressed those, it's all about really getting into the craft of it and making something that's a super kind of beautifully crafted piece of design. So that was kind of one example. But otherwise, I mean, my favorite projects are the ones where we can solve a bigger kind of challenge. So brands can solve a perception challenge. And in this case, Orchard Thieves are a cider brand, and they struggle with the perception with their consumers that their products are sweet, like super sweet, super artificial. And so they wanted to innovate a new drink to address this. So my team were briefed to create a new brand for Orchard Thieves Wild, which is basically made with more natural, less sweet apples, and that naturally makes the product less artificial, more appealing to a generation that's a bit more conscious about what they're consuming. So the brand icon is a fox, which is naturally an urban fox. It lives in the city, it lives in its comfort zone, and our kind of idea was all about, this idea of the fox leaving the city, getting out of its comfort zone and going into the wild to find this wild apple. And that was a story we were trying to tell, basically, all through this unique idea of discovery. So from the distinctive assets we created and the world we created around the brand and the pack, this was a super exciting project, and it ran through illustration, the way we create our assets, the way it started to work on the packaging. It was all about telling that unique story all the way through. So even from the way we communicated on social media, to the way we looked at advertising. And advertising is always really exciting because it gives us a new, interesting way to tell that story in a way that's relatable for consumers, in a way that gets people excited. So this is one of my favorite projects again. Like, it's about really telling that story in a distinctive way across a range of platforms. So hopefully that kind of gives you an idea of the breadth of work and the platforms that we work on in brand design. And it's obviously all about storytelling, solving challenges through design in a distinctive way. So just a bit of a snapshot of the kind of stuff we work on. But I've talked a lot about storytelling, so how did I kind of get here? Now I've been working for 10 years, and my story has looked a little bit like what you see on the screen right now. It's been a little bit unconventional. It's been a bit up and down, but it's been a super kind of fun ride, to be honest. So I started out in school, as many people do, but I liked art and design, but actually I really liked English, and I had this love for words. So I was once given a brief to market the iPod Mini, the iPod Nano, which only people my age will probably remember. But it was a really nice project, and actually it was sort of like a lightning bulb moment in that I thought, I can combine art, but also a love for words into a piece of work that can actually influence people. I mean, that's super exciting. So I had some great English and art teachers, and they sort of told us about, advertising as a career option, and graphic design is something you can do at university. But I think the biggest challenge really was trying to get my parents on board, and Mum's sort of sitting in the audience being like, yes. And Mum was like, why don't you do a joint degree? Like, can you do English and graphic design? And I was like, geography and graphic design? I was like, that doesn't exist, basically. But I think part of getting my parents to be convinced around, can I do something with this, basically, is taking them on the journey with me. So taking them to open days and, going to degree shows, and we went to exhibitions. And, I think that's the way to kind of start to get people involved. So somehow managed to convince them. And fast forward kind of 13 years, my parents are always the first people I show my work to, and they are literally my harshest critics. So, I'll have spent like a month and a half of like sleepless nights putting all this sort of life and soul into a project, and I'll think it's amazing. And I'll show my parents, and they'll be like, that's all right, isn't it? And I'll be like, right, I'm just head out. But I think it's super important to be able to share your work with your parents. I think that's part of why it's exciting to be a designer. It's nice to share my work with them, and most of the time they understand what I'm trying to do with it. So I went to university. I studied graphic design at Nottingham Trent. And anyone kind of looking to study graphic design, I'd always suggest going for a course with good industry contacts that set real life briefs, because that's what you need. Like university, it's not, in real life you don't get 3-month-long projects. It tends to be like a week, 2 days, 3 weeks, that's the longest you might get. So I think that's really important. And I kind of stayed versatile at uni, so I thought about advertising, but I really got interested in branding and the ways you can tell that story across platforms. So a bit of animation, I did a bit of campaign, a lot of identity work, and a bit of packaging, which was really nice. But despite this extremely optimistic photo here, I actually didn't really enjoy university. I found it quite overwhelming. I thought it was a very kind of intense, social, drink-heavy kind of culture, especially if you're South Asian. Like there were not many South Asians on my course, which I thought was interesting. But I actually ended up leaving university with a 3rd. I didn't do very well, and for that reason, I always think like, if you're going to go to university, it has to be for the right reasons. You don't always need a degree to get into this industry now, and I think there are other ways to get into it. So I'd recommend, looking at your options before you sort of get into your degree. But in the end, I mean, I didn't have to throw away my business cards because I actually won an award at uni for one of my projects. I still left with a really nice portfolio, and that kind of award led me on to my first kind of internship. So that took me into the real world. So I did a variety of internships. I did some in strategy, did some in animation, did some in brand design. I ended up at an agency called Anthem Worldwide. And they were like a brand experience agency, and they were one of the first teams that was kind of looking at combining the digital and the physical kind of platforms really to tell a brand story, which suited me kind of down to the ground. So that was super fun. But I was made redundant because we had a lot of fun, but we didn't make any money, which is obviously quite key for business to succeed. So, I think when you're that junior, again, coupled with the degree, it's a bit of a shock, and you think it's the end of the world. And again, it's something like redundancy. People don't talk about that in South Asian communities because it sounds like you failed kind of somewhere. But actually, I'm not really a quitter. Like, I don't really give up very easily. So for me, I was like, well, I'm just going to get my portfolio together, sent some applications out, spoke to a lot of recruiters, which I think is super valuable as well. And I had another job within a month, basically. So it was a good opportunity to find an agency maybe that I wanted to work at a bit more. Worked on a brand redesign for Clearasil within a really kind of nice, small boutique team. But for me, again, I was there for 5 months, but they were very packaging focused, and I've been a bit more of a generalist most of my life, so I wanted to look at moving. And so I moved to an agency called LPK, and that's actually where I've been for the last 7 years. And they worked on a lot of global brands and packaging, but they wanted to move with the times and move their stories into a digital space. So I moved there because I felt I could add a lot of value with my broader kind of skill set, and also I could learn a lot. And yeah, essentially LPK have taught me a lot about, distinctive brands, about storytelling, about crafting the detail, about getting really obsessed with your work. And, I'm really glad I've stayed there for so long. And in the last year, last couple of years, they rebranded to become a team called The Otherly. So we're now a nice kind of independent agency based in Holborn. And we do a lot on brand and innovation for a lot of drinks brands, chocolate brands, confectionery, a nice kind of variety. So essentially, most people start in the industry as an intern, and you work your way up to junior, midweight, senior, design director. And I've somehow made my way to design director in the last 7 years from kind of like a high junior. And basically, that just means that beyond design day-to-day, it's about managing the vision for a project. It's about managing the client relationships and building new relationships with your team as well. And a lot of it is about managing your team to bring your vision to life, which is a super exciting bit. It's about, trying to get the best out of people, which I think is super cool. But essentially, I wanted to share a little bit about how I progressed and how my career's kind of gone from junior to design director in 7 years. And this is basically how it's still going, and it will continue to always go like this because it is an industry that is constantly changing. There's always something to learn. Whenever you think you're done, you're not done. There's always something more, which is, I think, really exciting and, why I'm still in it. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was basically being proactive, and I think being proactive is so important. As a junior and a new grad, it's about, obviously, you want to look for opportunities in careers, but also it's about making connections with people. You want to find mentorship, you want to find advice, which I think is invaluable when you're that young, because you can learn so much from anyone who's been in the industry a little bit longer than you, and they could be people you come back to later in your life. But at the same time, if you're in an agency or a team or you're freelancing at the moment and you're a few years in, I think it's about finding opportunities. There are always opportunities to be found in your day-to-day work. So if, for example, if you're briefed on a piece of pack design and you see an opportunity for it to become an ad campaign, or you think it could come to life across social media as a launch, propose it. I think it's making it happen. A lot of people kind of say, well, I don't have the resources to do it. It would be budget, it would be time. But if you want to make it happen, then it's about making it happen and, propose it to your team, propose it to your clients. It could be just a sketch or some reference. But by doing that, actually, at minimum, you might learn something. And at best, actually, you might get more briefs for your team or yourself and more budget at the end of the day. So I think that's a really nice way to add value to a team that you already exist in. Even, whatever level you're at, junior, senior, it doesn't matter. And then on that proactive note, I think it's about self-evaluating and kind of taking responsibility for your own career. So, and being honest in the process. And my agency always encouraged us to self-evaluate. So step back and think, actually, what have I been doing really well at? Which is great, because I don't think a lot of us think about that enough. And at the same time, it's also, actually, what could I improve at, or what do I want to be? And I think it's knowing what kind of designer you want to be, and then you can set the goals to get there, essentially. Work on passion projects, and this is a really, really big one. I think it's so important to do stuff that's out of your day-to-day. It gives you something that's outside the constraints of a brief. And I'm really interested in type, and I've been doing 36 days of type for the last kind of few years. And it's just a good way to like teach yourself a few new processes, get a few styles under your belt, learn a bit of Procreate, and I'm really obsessed with that time-lapse feature on Procreate. I think it's amazing. I'm never going to stop being obsessed with it. It's really interesting to see how your design comes to life. And again, I think it's a great way to start to bring in new skills that you've learned outside of work into your day-to-day. It's just a massive bonus for employers and clients to see what your passions are. Get emotional. I think like care, it sounds like a really obvious one, but a lot of people I think don't understand how emotional great design is. You know, like good design is nice, but great design makes people feel something, whether it's surprise, delight, whether it's shock. That is the power of design, and I think the way you feel about a piece of work can really come through the spirit on the other side, which I think is great, and that's how every designer can make a design distinctive. It's not just those functional kind of techniques I talked about, it's all about what you put into it as well. So I was working on a pack design recently this week, and I wasn't really sure about the brief, and it was a bit awkward, and there was a lot of missing information, and you could kind of see it in the work that I put out afterwards. So it's about, you know, if you're excited about the work, you're going to see the excitement in the work afterwards, and I think that's really, really important. Teamwork makes the dream work. Again, maybe it's an obvious one, but I've met a lot of grads and juniors recently, and they've kind of been looking at agencies and where they want to work, and it's all about, oh, they've won these awards, or this is the PR, or this agency goes on holidays. And that's all great, that's really important, and it means they have money and that kind of thing. But actually, you want to find a team where you see people progress within it, because that's how you're going to progress. You want a team that's going to champion your progression and your growth. And I'm quite lucky because I have a team that really actually does that. My team kind of believe in me more than I believe in myself most of the time, which is amazing because they give me coaching opportunities. They were really supportive about this talk, and they really want you to step up and have a voice. So I think, like, you know, there are a lot of people I've met, some people in this room as well, where, you know, you felt as a South Asian you've been held back in your career. And, you know, that makes sense. I think I'm an extremely kind of rare case. But then really it's about looking for a team that's going to help you grow and give you the space to do it and the resources to do it, because they do exist, I think. And then my last point really is just about show up and show out. And actually, I'm just going to pull up my notes as well, because I've got a lot to say about this, and there's so much to say I don't want to miss anything. But show up and show out, it's actually a value that my company has in relation to design, and I've basically kind of just stolen it for the purposes of this talk. So the way I interpret it is that it's not just about hitting a brief, it's about hitting a brief in style. So it's not just aiming for good, it's about aiming for mind-blowing, basically, going above and beyond. Because that's how you get clients coming back. They want to see what they've not briefed you. You know, what can you add value? How can you add value in a way that they've not asked for? But I also think the sentiment is applicable to South Asian creatives. We have a perception of kind of being passive, being quite quiet, achievers in traditional subjects, but not necessarily leaders. You know, we show up and we do the work, basically. And every South Asian I know has an extremely strong work ethic, like we do the work. And my parents are the most kind of hardworking people I know, and they always take pride in their work, right? As I'm sure most of you can relate to, like they put other people first before them, and it's not just about the money, it's about doing a good job. And they were always told, you know, if you work hard, people will see the value you bring, and, you know, that's it, be kind of happy with where you are. But we've been talking about this a lot as well, but to progress your career today, especially in the creative industry, you have to not just show up and work hard, you have to actually show out. And by that I mean you have to be a bit more vocal, basically, and I think that's what it is. Like, you have to vocalize your achievements and what you want to do next. You know, I always found it cringe when people were like, oh, you know, tell people you're a South Asian designer. I'm like, why do I want to do that? It's all about I want it to be about my work at the end of the day. So you don't have to be like, I'm a South Asian person and I'm doing design. You just have to be like, I'm doing design, and look at my latest piece of work, or look, I just got promoted recently. It's that kind of thing, you know. The more we celebrate our achievements in the industry, the more we'll start to smash the stereotype, I think, and more others will start seeing the representation, because I think it does exist. As Rajiv was saying, actually, it does exist. It's just that we don't talk about it and recognize it ourselves. So I think what's really nice about the Brown Ink Collective is that it gives South Asian creatives a platform and a voice. So for me, like, going to the events have really kind of pushed me out of my comfort zone. I didn't have any brown friends before I joined this kind of event, and I'm honestly mind blown every time I come to see the talent in the room. That's not necessarily in brand or design, but it's there, it's creative. And, you know, like, I think a lot of people have sort of said having an international background or an accent can be kind of seen as a weakness, and I'm speaking to you from a very privileged position because I've been brought up in London. But I think, in contrast, I I feel like cultural backgrounds are a massive positive point of difference. I think our background gives us like an appreciation of emotion, of culture, of empathy, of drama, which I think is amazing, and colour, and all of these things are so important in brand design. It's unbelievable. So it's those perspectives that I'd hope would help you stand out positively in an industry that is looking for those diverse perspectives like actively. So I think if you take away a couple of things today, firstly, it's tell a good story, design for distinctive. Like good design is nice, it works, but actually great design is strategic, it's distinctive, it's impactful, it's emotional, it's beautiful, it's effective. And I think that's the biggest thing I've taken away from my 10 years. That is how you make good work. That should be the ambition. If I can do it, so can you. I mean, like, this is the first time I've sort of been honest about my career journey. It wasn't, it wasn't the smoothest kind of thing. It wasn't the nicest, and it wasn't the easiest. But I think, it's about taking those knockdowns that will come with any creative career and finding a way to reframe them, learn from them, and, move from them, basically. Cultivate a growth mindset. Again, it's that idea of, you don't necessarily have to have natural talent from the get-go. You can learn software, you can learn how to design, I think. But it's always about having the attitude of progress, because it is an industry that keeps moving and you need to keep moving with it. It's about having the drive to do that, basically, and want to get better. And then finally, it's about being the representation. As Rajiv was saying, there aren't many people that you see in the industry who are more senior than you, and I definitely didn't have that. But for me, it's not something that should hold you back. You can be the representation, do you know what I mean? It's about us talking about how we're smashing the stereotype, and hopefully the next generation will kind of start to see that. It'll become much more common, and we won't have to talk about it in a specific event, I guess. So go forth and represent, basically. And thank you for listening today.